Good afternoon. It's Saturday, the 21st of March. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News, broadcasting from Jerusalem. We open with the Iranian nuclear negotiations and the declaration from U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry a short time ago that substantial progress has been made in the talks. The top American diplomat made his announcement in Switzerland before his departure for London, where he will hold meetings with European allies on the issue.
We have not yet reached the finish line. But make no mistake, we have the opportunity to try to get this right. It's a matter of political will and tough decision-making. It's a matter of choices, and we must all choose wisely in the days ahead. We have made genuine progress. We have all kept the commitments that we made in the joint plan, and we have all lived up to our obligations. We have worked long and hard to achieve a comprehensive agreement that resolves international concerns about Iran's nuclear program. Over the past months, the P5+1 have made substantial progress towards that fundamental goal, though important gaps remain. In London, we will share ideas this evening about how to resolve the remaining sticking points, as I did yesterday on the telephone with Foreign Minister Lavrov and Foreign Minister Wang Yi. We will coordinate our strategy as we have, as we approach the end of the March deadline, to reach an understanding on the major issues.
Kerry's comments follow a halt in the Lausanne negotiations that were put on hold to enable members of Tehran's delegation to return home so they could attend the funeral of the mother of the Islamic Republic's president, Hassan Rouhani. Resumption of the make-or-break discussions are now set for next week, aimed at reaching an agreement over long-term assurance to the world that Tehran will be incapable of producing nuclear weapons. Officials working behind the scenes say that Washington and Tehran are drafting elements for a deal that commits the Iranians to a 40% cut in the number of machines that could possibly be used to produce atomic bombs in exchange for quick relief from some crippling economic sanctions and the partial lifting of the United Nations embargo on conventional arms. The sides are hoping to reach a comprehensive agreement by June 30th. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said today that Paris is pushing for a nuclear deal that will ensure that Tehran is not able to build atomic weapons in the future. He added that if the accord is not sufficiently solid, other countries in the region would see it as not serious enough and pursue weapons development of their own, leading to an extremely dangerous nuclear proliferation. France has set tougher criteria for an agreement with the Islamic Republic almost from the beginning and is holding firm on securing significant concessions from Tehran in the drafting of a framework agreement. In other news, further alleged details are emerging over the content of U.S. President Barack Obama's Thursday night telephone call to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, ostensibly to congratulate him on his re-election victory, with sources describing the 30-minute conversation as very bitter. Local media is reporting that unnamed Israeli officials claim that the U.S. leader made it clear that he does not believe Netanyahu genuinely supports a two-state solution with the Palestinians and warned that Washington will no longer automatically support Israel at the United Nations. One source went so far as to say that Obama indicated his intention to abandon Israel at the world body. Heavy skepticism and criticism on the part of the American leader were strikingly evident during the conversation as he allegedly dismissed as insufficient Netanyahu's clarification that his support for the two-state solution has not changed, but that in recent years, realities in the Middle East have. United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has called Prime Minister Netanyahu to congratulate him for his re-election and also to urge him to reaffirm his commitment to a two-state solution with the Palestinians. According to Ban's spokesman, the UN chief reiterated his own view that the establishment of a Palestinian state is the only way forward. He also reportedly encouraged Netanyahu to release the tax revenues that Israel collects on behalf of the Palestinian Authority, but has been holding back on turning over in response to Ramallah's bid for membership at the International Criminal Court. Turning to coalition-building developments, and Kulanu head Moshe Kahlon is insisting that his party's joining the government is not a foregone conclusion. Sources say that Kahlon is privately indicating that he would only enter a coalition on the condition that the new government is based on the policies that he laid out during his campaign. In addition to his demand to become finance minister, it is believed that Kahlon will demand that Kulanu members Yoav Gallant be appointed defense minister and poverty expert Eli Alalouf head an as of yet unspecified ministry. Times of Israel editor David Horovitz told IBA's Eli Wogelenter that one thing that this election has taught us is that no one can rely on public opinion polls, and that when it comes to campaigns, Netanyahu is truly in a class of his own.
Isn't that the big surprise? When all is said and done, that a party that in the outgoing Knesset had 18 seats comes back in with about 30. That's the real radical shift here. And I think it underlines that there's Israeli politicians and then there's Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, you can quibble over the tactics and you can think the tactics were great, but here was somebody who energized the campaign, and he won this election.
In the last 72 hours.
He won this election, single-handed. This was a referendum on Netanyahu. Netanyahu battled, and Netanyahu won.
And in fact, 5 days before, he was barely at 20.
Well, here's the thing, Ellie. Anything you ask, and you say things like, he was barely at 20, maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. The polls say he was barely at 20. Did his polls tell him something different? Would he have acted differently if he had polls that showed that things were a little bit better? What do we make of the polls, right? You know, all conversation in that direction. And, you know, let's stress that I certainly always warn, don't believe the polls, don't believe the polls, don't even believe the exit polls, right, in conversations that we've had. You know, we don't know. We don't know. Did he make a dramatic recovery? We do know that the exit polls were wrong. We do know that the Likud has soared. And we do know that Netanyahu fought a very, very effective, impassioned campaign, and the opposition didn't.
And how much of it reflects his brilliance as a campaigner versus the people really running scared themselves? Not that he made them run scared. They really were running scared.
I've got to tell you, if I were dispassionate ideologically, and I'm watching this election, I see one person who really wants to be prime minister and other people who want it less. Let's take the issue in the final hours of the campaign, just before, that on the Monday he gives an interview in which he's asked, so that means under your watch there won't be a Palestinian state, and he says, indeed. Now, if I'm the opposition who thinks that the failure to find an accommodation with the Palestinians is devastating for Israel. Even though I'm the opposition, I'm very wary about the Palestinian leadership. I don't think it's going to be easy. I don't even think it's possible in the short time. Where's my cry of people of Israel? This is not okay. The man who is prime minister and wants to be prime minister is ruling out Palestinian statehood for the foreseeable future. Now, we have worries and we don't think it's going to be easy, but we have to strive for a separation from the Palestinians. Where was the response? Where was the mirror, passion and energy and breaking the rules and reaching out to the public and showing that you have an alternative path? You know, I don't think we saw that.
And what about complaints that he was actually over the edge, saying things like, Gewalt, Gewalt, the Arabs are coming out to vote?
Listen, personally, I think that is, you know, something that was extremely worrying. I think Netanyahu is, as a politician, somebody who stirs up different sectors of the electorate against each other. And in fact, in the final days of this campaign, he cannibalized his own camp, right? He essentially called on voters who want him to be prime minister. He said, you have to vote for Likud. In other words, you can't vote for Jewish Home, you can't vote for Yisrael Beitenu, you can't vote for Yachad, and you can't vote for Kulanu, and you can't vote for Shas, and you can't even vote for United Torah Judaism. If you're that sector of the electorate that wants me as prime minister, you have to vote for me. He went to all partisan lengths. And some of those tactics, certainly, I would not endorse.
Or over the line.
I think they were over the line, for sure. But I also, I think we can all say, take a step back, look at the passion and the commitment and the political skill. You saw it on one side only. You saw it from Netanyahu. There was nobody who came close.
What impact will the Prime Minister's re-election have on the Israeli Arab community? That's the question IBA's Eli Wogelenter asked of Dr. Mordechai Nissan of the Hebrew University.
The Israeli Arab community organized very effectively to go to the elections with a single united Arab list, which apparently now has won 13 seats, which is really 2 more than they had in the previous Knesset. That political success is something which will have an impact on Knesset life, but it only on the fringes, because in essence the Arabs are not part of the political power structure in the Knesset, and they of course will not be in the government. In which case the Arab community remains a community that is critical and grievous towards the state, towards the government, with its traditional litany of complaints about discrimination and the like, and underrepresented and under-budgeted and so on, which is a constant refrain. They too, really, like their Palestinian brothers in the territories, have been unable to really come forward and openly accept the legitimacy of Israel as a Jewish state, and to show some goodwill as citizens of the state, a state which provides them with basic services and needs as for all other citizens, and to show some goodwill and acceptance and gratitude and play a more positive role. But if the Arabs continue to be what they have been in the past, openly identifying with Hamas and Fatah, Palestinian powers, and openly critical and disdainful of the Israeli army and its soldiers in battle, then this is not an Arab community which will arouse public support, public Jewish support, that somehow they should enjoy better treatment by the state. They have to come forward and then to expect to be given the things they want, symbolic and substantial things that they want, budgets and recognition of their Palestinian Arab identity within Israel. They will not earn this so long as they continue to refuse to show gratitude and recognition in the Jewish state of Israel.
Since no one is moving forward on that path, can you see a scenario where there might be an outbreak of increased violence, perhaps intifada, happening in Jerusalem and in the West Bank?
Within the West Bank, this is always a potential. Again, we have to differentiate between the rhetoric, which is very politically insurgent, and aggressive rhetoric that comes from the leadership of the PLO, the Palestinian Authority, but on the street, aside from political theater on the street here and there regarding demonstrations and the like by young people, things have been rather stable over the long haul of a number of years now in Judea and Samaria and in East Jerusalem. And this is to be credited to the success both of Israel's accommodating policy toward the Palestinian population, for all intents and purposes, domains of freedom of expression and movement and job opportunities and the like, and credited to the fact that the Palestinian population, when all is said and done, the man in the street, as it were, wants to be able to conduct his life in a stable environment and in order to provide food for his family. And that means jobs and not demonstrations. In which case, though the potential for an outbreak of Palestinian uprising, violence, intifada is always there, it is always there. It's not something which one can foresee easily, it seems to me, and it's not something which necessarily will take place, but I would never discount the possibility that the Palestinians will somehow choose, whoever does the choosing, if it's the grassroots at the bottom or if it comes from above, from the Abbas leadership itself. But we cannot discount the possibility that a new period of violence can occur. But again, it doesn't mean that's something which Israel cannot contain or deal with, and it doesn't mean that that outbreak of violence or intifada will somehow benefit the Palestinians thereafter. Not likely.
Both of those interviews, by the way, were recorded before the Sabbath. And turning now to the civil war raging in Syria, and at least 20 people were killed and more than 70 wounded in a northeast city of Hasaka in twin attacks that targeted Kurds celebrating their New Year holiday. One of the attacks was carried out by an Islamic State suicide bomber, and the other was caused by a bomb planted in a nearby area. In other violence, some 70 troops and pro-government militias were killed by Islamic State forces in the center province of Homs over the past 3 days, during which ISIS fighters also reportedly sustained an unknown number of casualties. In other ISIS-related warfare, at least 142 people have been killed in a fresh wave of violence in Yemen. The Sunni-based Islamic State is claiming responsibility for triple suicide bombings in the capital of Sana'a during Friday prayers at 2 mosques, primarily used by supporters of the Shiite Houthi terror group that has seized control of Yemen's government. 345 others were injured in the attacks. There were also Houthi airstrikes against the presidential palace and the international airport in Aden, where President Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi fled in late February. The deputy spokesman for the United Nations announced condemnation of the attacks by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and said that he is calling on all factions in the Arabian Peninsula nation to work with the international community to restore calm to the area.
He reminds all Yemeni parties of their obligations under relevant Security Council resolutions. The Secretary General urges all to remain fully engaged with his special advisor on Yemen so as to enable him to continue to exercise the Secretary General's good offices in close cooperation with the members of the GCC and the Security Council.
A Toronto jury has found 2 men guilty of a series of terror-related charges. Raed Jasser, who is a Canadian citizen of Palestinian descent, and Jiheb Essagayer, who is of Tunisian ancestry, were arrested in 2013. We get more on the story in this report from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Jiheb Essagayer and Raed Jasser were recorded on police surveillance video casing railway tracks outside Toronto. They were with an undercover FBI agent who became the main witness against them at their terror trial. His testimony, along with wiretap evidence, revealed a plot to derail a New York to Toronto passenger train in retaliation for Western incursions in Muslim lands. There was also evidence the two talked about poisoning the food of soldiers on a military base and shooting Jewish people or public figures at an event like Toronto's Pride Parade.
I would describe them as real serious public dangers. That's based on the evidence that we heard, that's how I would describe them.
But the jury seemed to struggle to come to an agreement on some of the counts against Jasser. During the trial, his lawyer argued he never intended to go through with the derailment plot, that he was just a con man looking to separate the others from their money. 7 days into deliberations, the jury declared they'd reached an impasse on 2 of his charges. The judge sent them back to try again. Today, they couldn't agree on 1 of the charges against Jasser, convicting only Essagayer of conspiracy to derail the train. But they did find both men guilty of conspiring to commit murder and participating in a terrorist organization.
Well-known author, poet, and songwriter Yonatan Geffen was attacked at his home near Netanya last night. Police say that they believe he was assaulted in retribution for his denouncing the Prime Minister as a racist and when publicly expressing disappointment with the election results. After opening his door the night of the attack, the 68-year-old left-wing activist was hit by the perpetrator, who called him a traitor, and also threw an egg at him before fleeing the scene. Police are investigating the incident. Turning now to the weather, and the IBA weather team tells us to expect partly cloudy skies and rain showers in the north until noon tomorrow. Here's the forecast at home and abroad over the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Laura Cornfield will be here tomorrow to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a wonderful week and shalom from Jerusalem.